the mystery behind dual dimension tests for dark chosen ones. There comes a moment in every dark chosen one's journey when the world begins to glitch, not in a technological sense, but in a spiritual one. You're walking down the street and suddenly everything feels hollow, like a movie set. You're in a conversation, but it's as if time is stretching unnaturally. People repeat themselves, synchronicities pile up. You look at the clock and it's the same number over and over again. You feel watched, not by people, but by something higher. That's when you know the dual dimension tests have begun. And if you're watching this right now, you're not watching by accident. You've already entered the test. The question is, do you know what's real anymore? I remember the first time I slipped into it, if slip is even the right word. It was more like I woke up inside a dream. I didn't know I was dreaming. Everything looked the same, but the air felt charged, like static before a storm. People around me had the same faces, but their eyes weren't quite right. They didn't see me the same way. Some avoided eye contact completely, while others looked at me too long, as if trying to figure out if I knew. And that's the first rule of the dual dimension test. Nothing confirms itself directly. Everything is encoded. Everything is symbolic. You are being spoken to through signs, patterns, frequencies, and the moment you respond correctly, the next layer opens.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
What most people don't realize is that the dual dimension test doesn't happen in another world. It overlays this one. That's why it's so hard to explain. You could be sitting in your apartment scrolling through your phone and suddenly feel like something just shifted. The room goes quiet. The shadows move a little differently. You feel a presence, a question hanging in the air. Not words, but energy. It's asking, will you take the bait of distraction, or will you notice the invitation hidden in the stillness? You see, the dual dimension tests are not just spiritual pop quizzes. They are thresholds, entry points into mastery. Not everyone gets them. Only those who carry the frequency of remembrance. Only those who are encoded with ancient soul contracts. The dark chosen ones, the ones who didn't come here to live soft lives, but to tear through the veil and bring back knowledge that has been buried for eons. But here's the catch. These tests are not like the ones you faced in school. They don't come with clear instructions. In fact, they come disguised as chaos, confusion, emotional pain, isolation. You'll lose friends. You'll feel like your identity is dissolving. You'll question your sanity more times than you can count. Because that's part of the design. The test is not about finding the right answer. It's about becoming the right frequency. That's the only way to pass, not with logic, but with alignment. I want you to think about this. Have you ever had a moment where you made a seemingly small decision, like taking a different route home or saying no to an invitation, and your whole life changed after that? Maybe you avoided an accident. Maybe you met someone who shifted your path. Maybe you stumbled into an insight that cracked your reality open. That was not coincidence. That was dimension crossing. That was the universe testing your intuitive compass, seeing if you could feel your way into the higher path, even when it made no sense to the mind. In the first stage of the test, the universe tests your perception. Can you see beyond the visible? Can you read energy, not just appearances? You'll start to notice that some people drain you instantly, while others light you up without saying a word. You'll sense that some places feel alive while others feel dead. Colors might seem brighter, sounds might become more layered. You're not hallucinating, you're calibrating. Your senses are being upgraded to multidimensional perception. And then the second stage begins. The universe challenges your emotional stability. You'll get triggered deeply. Old wounds resurface. Childhood patterns explode. People betray you. You'll feel like everything is falling apart. But here's the secret. The test is seeing if you'll react or respond. Will you collapse into victimhood or will you rise into awareness? Will you repeat the past or reprogram your future? This is where most people fail. They think the pain is punishment, but it's not. It's purification. The dual dimension test strips away anything that is not aligned with your soul's vibration. That includes relationships, jobs, beliefs, even your identity. You are being emptied so your true self can emerge. If you cling to the old, you'll get stuck in a loop. But if you surrender to the process, portals begin to open. And I mean literal portals. You'll start having dreams that bleed into waking life. You'll begin to see symbols that repeat across time and space. You'll feel déjà vu, not the "this feels familiar" kind, but the "I've done this before in another timeline" kind. And that's because you have. You're not just being tested in one dimension, you're being tested across many. The same test appears in different forms, different lifetimes, different versions of you, and the choices you make now ripple across all of them. This is why integrity is everything. Not moral perfection, but energetic coherence. Do your actions align with your soul's truth, even when no one is watching, especially when no one is watching, because someone is watching, not just guides or spirits, but you, your higher self, your future self, your parallel selves. They are all tuned in, waiting to see what you'll choose. Will you react in fear or move with faith? Will you fall into the illusion or walk through the fire? Let me ask you something. If you knew that every moment of your life was being recorded across dimensions, not for judgment, but for activation, how would you live differently? Would you speak differently? Would you love more deeply? Would you stop negotiating with your power and finally own it? This is the invitation of the dual dimensional test. It's not about proving yourself to some cosmic jury. It's about remembering what you already are, a multidimensional being mastering the art of embodiment, a soul that came here to play at the highest level, and the game has already begun. You're not late, you're right on time. The code of mirrors, how every person you meet is a clue to your other selves. When we move deeper into the dual dimension test, the scenery doesn't just shift, it becomes reflective. Suddenly, life itself turns into a hall of mirrors, not the kind that distort, but the kind that reveal. And the most unsettling part? Every person you meet, every emotional reaction you have, every dynamic you enter, it's not about them. It's about you. It's about the version of you that they are pulling into your awareness. And until you realize this, the test continues in circles. But once you see the pattern, once you decode the mirror, the spiral begins to ascend. Let me make this clear. People are not random. They are assignments. They are echoes. They are fragments of your own frequency materialized in flesh. Some to awaken you, some to trigger you, and some to test whether you've truly integrated the lessons your soul has been rehearsing across lifetimes. This is the third stage of the dual dimension test, and it's one of the hardest to pass because it requires radical self-responsibility. No more blaming, no more "they did this to me." Instead, we must ask, what part of me called this in? What version of me is still vibrating at the frequency of this experience? It's a brutal question, but it's how you unlock the multidimensional code. Because here's the truth, you are not just you. You are a living constellation of selves. Past selves, future selves, shadow selves, higher selves. And each person you meet is a messenger pointing you toward one of those selves. The friend who always drains your energy, she's showing you the part of yourself that still doesn't believe you have the right to set boundaries. The partner who mirrors your abandonment wounds, he's activating the version of you that still seeks validation from outside instead of within. The stranger who shows up at just the right moment with the exact words you needed to hear, that's your higher self, disguised in the costume of coincidence. This is where the test gets multidimensional, because as soon as you recognize that you are meeting yourself in every interaction, the rules of the game change. You stop trying to control people and start decoding them. You stop reacting emotionally and start reading the energetic blueprint. And in doing so, you begin to shift dimensions, not by force, but by frequency. You raise your vibration not through effort, but through awareness. But don't be mistaken, this isn't about being passive. This is about becoming so aware that nothing slips past your energetic radar. You begin to notice the patterns, how certain people always show up at specific phases of your spiritual growth, how you attract the same archetype over and over until you finally change the inner script, how even your enemies are playing sacred roles, forcing you to level up. This is why forgiveness becomes a superpower, not because it absolves others, but because it frees you from the loop. When you forgive, you reclaim the piece of your soul that was trapped in that interaction. You collapse the timeline. And then something surreal begins to happen. You meet people who feel like déjà vu. You look into a stranger's eyes and see entire lifetimes. Conversations start to feel orchestrated. You're not crazy, you're just remembering. These are soul fragments reuniting. This is the convergence, the moment when timelines collapse and all your other selves begin to align. The people you're magnetizing now are not random, they are keys. Unlock them and you unlock versions of yourself that were dormant, waiting for this exact moment. You begin to realize that even your most painful relationships were sacred contracts. You agreed long before this incarnation to meet these souls, to trigger each other, to challenge each other, to awaken each other. And when you see it that way, the pain doesn't vanish, but it transforms. It becomes fuel. It becomes wisdom. It becomes the very thing that burns away the illusion of separation and shows you the deeper truth. There is only one of us here, playing every role, wearing every mask, creating every story to lead us back to ourselves. So I ask you now, what if every person you've ever met, friend, lover, enemy, stranger, was actually you wearing another face, speaking another language, delivering a message you weren't yet ready to hear? Would you treat them differently? Would you listen more closely? Would you stop pushing them away and start asking what part of you they are here to reflect? Because in this mirror game, awareness is the only way out, and the more you see, the more you shift. You become the lucid dreamer, the conscious creator, the master of your own matrix. And from this state, the dual dimension test begins to fold in on itself. The mirrors stop distorting, they start revealing. And what you see staring back at you is no longer confusion, it's clarity, it's power. It's all the versions of you rising into alignment. The reality switch, how to shift dimensions with your choices. Reality is not fixed. That's the most terrifying and liberating truth you will ever hear. You are not stuck where you are, not in your circumstances, not in your wounds, not even in your timeline. But here's the part no one wants to talk about. The reason you haven't shifted is not because you can't, it's because part of you is still choosing not to. And in the dual dimension test, this is the fourth stage, conscious dimensional navigation. The moment you realize that your choices are not just decisions, they are portals. Every thought you think, every word you speak, every action you take, is either anchoring you deeper into this timeline or opening a new one. Most people live on autopilot. They repeat the same patterns, speak the same scripts, feel the same emotions, and then wonder why nothing changes. It's because they haven't activated the one thing that separates the awakened from the asleep. Deliberate, energetic authorship, and that's what this test is really about. Can you stay conscious long enough to choose a different frequency even when everything in your current reality is screaming at you to stay the same? Let me be clear, shifting dimensions doesn't mean you vanish into thin air and reappear in a fantasy world. It means you begin to vibrate at a new frequency, and the world around you, people, opportunities, even physical environments must begin to mirror that shift. It starts subtly. You stop resonating with certain conversations. You feel physically sick in spaces you used to tolerate. You lose interest in drama, gossip, fear. At first, it feels like loss. But it's not loss, it's alignment. You're not losing anything. You're making space for the version of reality you've been asking for. And this is where the test intensifies. Because the old dimension doesn't let you go without a fight. Your ego will panic, your nervous system will glitch, your body will resist. Why? Because you're stepping into the unknown. And the unknown is terrifying to the parts of you that have survived by mastering the familiar, even if the familiar was pain. This is where you must choose, not once, but over and over again. You must choose the new vibration even when the old reality is still echoing through your life. You must speak the language of your desired dimension before it manifests. You must walk like the version of you who already lives there, even if the world hasn't caught up yet. That is how you collapse time. But this isn't about pretending, it's about embodiment. You don't fake joy, you cultivate it. You don't lie about being abundant, you align with the frequency of abundance through gratitude, generosity, and energetic openness. You don't demand love, you become the vibration of love that magnetizes all things to you. That's the secret. You don't attract what you want, you attract what you are willing to become. This is why every test you face is not really about the external event. It's about the micro choice you make in response. Do you react in fear or respond in truth? Do you speak from your wound or from your wisdom? Do you shrink to be accepted by the old world or expand into the version of yourself that scares even you a little? Because that's the edge. That's where the shift happens, when you're willing to disappoint others to honor your soul. When you're willing to risk the comfort of the known for the magic of the unknown. Let me ask you something that most people will never dare to confront. If you knew that this very moment was a dimensional fork, if your next thought, your next breath, your next word would determine everything that comes next, what would you choose differently right now? Would you still complain? Would you still wait until you felt ready? Would you still look for permission from a world that was never built for your expansion? Or would you claim it? Claim the frequency, claim the vision, claim the version of you that already exists in the higher timeline. Because she's not waiting for you to be perfect. He's not waiting for you to have all the answers. That version of you is just waiting for you to choose. Not in theory, in practice, in embodiment, in every single breath. This is not a game of fate, it's a game of alignment, and the reality you live in tomorrow will always be the result of the energy you chose today. The final gate. Unlocking the return code to your true origin. There comes a point in every dark chosen one's journey when the external world no longer offers answers. You've passed the emotional tests, navigated the mirrors, shifted dimensions through choice after choice, and yet there remains a lingering emptiness, a silence that feels ancient, a pull that comes not from this world, but from something beyond it. Something older than memory. That's when you know you are approaching the final gate. And on the other side of that gate is not more knowledge, not more power, but a question that will shatter everything you've built. Are you ready to return to your true origin? This isn't about going back to the past, it's about going beyond identity itself. Because everything you've done so far, every initiation, every test, has been preparing you to remember what you were before the simulation of self began. And I call it a simulation because that's what it is. The body, the name, the story, the roles, all of it is a costume. Beautiful, sacred, yes, but still a costume. Now the final test is whether you can remove the last mask, the one you didn't even know you were wearing. The return code isn't something you find, it's something you become. It activates when you stop trying to be anything, when you release the need to prove, to perform, to protect, when you stop chasing purpose and realize you are the purpose, you were the mission all along. Not your achievements, not your story, just you. The raw, pulsating field of consciousness that came from the source, fractured into infinite expressions, and chose to incarnate here. Not to escape, but to remember. Not to transcend, but to embody. But here's the paradox. To return, you must go inward so fully that the outer world dissolves. You must die, not physically, but energetically. You must allow every false version of yourself to fall away. The hero, the victim, the seeker, the teacher, even the spiritual persona, especially the spiritual persona. That's the hardest one to let go of because it feels so close to truth. But even that is still a layer, and the origin code lies beneath all layers. This is why so many stop here. The silence becomes too loud, the spaciousness too disorienting. The ego panics, asking, if I let go of who I think I am, what will be left? And the answer is terrifying, nothing. But that nothingness is sacred. It's not the absence of self. It is the infinite field from which all selves arise. It is the space before form. the breath before the first word, the stillness before creation. And when you surrender to it without resistance, something miraculous happens. You don't disappear, you expand. You realize that you are not in the universe, you are the universe, momentarily dreaming itself into a body, into a name, into a mission. And in that realization, the return code activates. You don't need to go anywhere. You have arrived. You are home. But here's what no one tells you. Returning doesn't mean leaving this world behind. It means entering it more fully, with new eyes, with a heart that remembers, with a presence that shifts timelines just by existing. You become a living portal, a bridge between dimensions, a being who can hold the duality of form and formlessness without losing your center. That's the true mastery, not escaping this world but being fully in it, untouched, unmoved, deeply rooted in the eternal. So let me ask you, for the last time, if you let go of everything you thought you were and remembered the infinite being you've always been, what would you do differently? Would you live more boldly? Would you love without conditions? Would you stop waiting for permission and simply become? Because that is the final gate, not a door to walk through, but a truth to awaken within. And now it is open. Welcome back.